Grey port opens in silence. Not city silence, because the port is always humming, but that weird, suspended silence you get in your own head when you know something terrible is about to happen and you are the one holding the knife. The camera pushes in on this girl in a wine-red dress standing in an empty banquet hall, shoes too big, curls pinned up with trembling hands. She looks like she's wandered in from someone else's party. Then a man twice her size steps into frame, grabs her wrist, leans down to hiss something in her ear. We don't hear his words. We just see her eyes go flat. The girl blinks once, lifts the gun hidden in her clutch, and shoots him in the throat without flinching. Blood on lace, echoing gunshot, then hard cut to the present day, a woman in white gloves smiling for cameras, frozen mid-wave as flashes pop like distant artillery. That's the first time, done being a lady time to shoot, tells you the truth about itself. It looks like a rich people crime melodrama at first, something you might put on in the background while scrolling. And then it drops a 13-year-old assassin in the opening minute and basically says, yeah, this is the ride. On Jonota News, I go through a lot of dramas about revenge and trauma and beautiful broken people, but this one grabbed me by the throat so fast I actually paused it just to breathe. If you are new here, hey, welcome, I dive deep into the messy stuff. Hit subscribe if you like your drama reviews like your coffee, long, a little bitter, but weirdly comforting. Spoiler-wise, I'm going to talk about major turns up through the mid to late episodes, but I'll keep the absolute endgame decisions and the final kills vague, so you still have things to scream at when you watch. So, Grey Port. The show's fictional coastal city feels like someone took Baltimore, Genoa, and a dash of Gotham and then soaked it in salt air and old money. It's all decaying brick warehouse and marble-columned museums, docks with shipping containers stacked like Tetris pieces, and charity galas held in buildings that used to be courthouses back when people actually believed in the law. For a decade, Grey Port has been haunted by a rumor, the Reaper, a child who killed a man at 13 and then disappeared into the silk-curtained world of the Moretti family. Everyone knows the story in that half-urban legend, half-recorded trial transcript way. No one knows where she went. And in episode 1, the camera cheerfully informs us that she's been at the center of every press photo the whole time. Rosa Moretti, played with this unnervingly controlled heat by Isabella Conti, is 23 when we meet her, properly. She's on stage at a charity auction, dim chandelier light bathing her in champagne gold, auctioning off a weekend in her family's seaside villa to raise money for youth literacy. She laughs at the right times, touches her fiancé's arm when she introduces him, plays the roll down to the tilt of her chin. But you can see it in the way she scans the exits between sentences, the way her fingers twitch when a waiter drops a tray in the back of the hall. You feel this constant low-level predator tension humming under all that silk and etiquette. The show never lets you forget that the Reaper is still in there, she's just learned which fork to use. A lot of dramas would take their time getting to the title moment. This one doesn't. Done being a lady time to shoot basically sets up its thesis in, 15 minutes? We watch Rosa glide through this charity circuit, kissing cheeks, blessing foundations, delivering speech lines about giving the children of Grey Port a future free from violence. It's almost funny, and the show knows it. The editing keeps intercutting slow zooms on the charity logo with these blink and you miss flashes of young Roja's gloved hand wiping blood off a doorknob. It's mocking the performance while also asking, very quietly, is this actually her prison? But the crack in the mask finally shows on the balcony. The balcony scene is where I knew the writers were serious. Rosa steps away from the party, out into the cold air above Grey Port Harbor. The music from the ballroom gets muffled the moment the doors swing shut behind her, all you can hear is the faint rush of traffic and the wind of the water. She's still in those white gloves, fingers curled on the iron rail, and for the first time we see the facade slip. The polite smile drops off like a mask hung on a peg. Her shoulders fall. She pulls a cigarette out of a little clutch bag, already a tiny rebellion for this pure, public persona, and you can almost see the Reaper stretching under her skin like a shadow. That's when Evan walks out. Evan Devereux, played by Finn Hart, is introduced with the kind of competent blandness that makes you underestimate him. He's the golden boy fiancé, old money, clean cut, a lawyer with the perfect jawline and the perfect sound bites about reform. His family built half the city's museums on forward-thinking investments that everyone knows came from old mob ties. He's supposed to represent Rosa's way out, her tether to something normal. And he really does love her. There's a moment as he slips off her gloves to warm her hands in his that feels so intimate it almost hurts. He doesn't know he's undressing armor. When he tells her, "You don't have to be on with me," it sounds like a promise. The tragedy is that he doesn't understand what off actually means for her. If you are waiting for the drama to undercut him as a weak, clueless male lead, that's where it gets interesting. Instead of making even the idiot she lies to, the show makes him smart, just pointed in the wrong direction. He picks up on the tension in her shoulders. He senses that the charity work is, in a way, her penance. He just thinks it's about survivor's guilt from that awful night with that man when you were 13, not about the fact that she killed him in cold blood like she was snapping the neck of a bird. Himself a foster kid who grew up in the Deveriux home after his mother OD'd, he honestly believes you can become someone new if you just choose it hard enough. That sincerity is his vulnerability and his weapon. And what the show does with that later, without ever turning him into a familiar punching bag, is one of the things I really appreciated. The obvious reading is, Roja's fiancé is naive. The better reading is, Roja's fiancé is dangerously idealistic. But if even is the earnest phase of the Deveriux household, Leela is its teeth. Leela Deveriux, the so-called foster sister, saunters into the story in ripped black silk and a smirk that could cut glass. She's introduced mid-gala, late, with this deliberately low-status entrance, camera following her battered boots across marble while some middle-aged socialite whispers that once the stray they picked up from the south side. Amara Cho plays her with this perfect mix of feral street kid and self-taught social climber. She knows where the cameras are and precisely how much contempt she's allowed to show before someone calls security. She hugs even too long, accidentally, almost knocks over Rosa's champagne, and within 3 minutes you understand why fandom would either worship her or hate her guts. She's that character. On the surface, Leela's role is simple, the overprotective sister who thinks Roja's too polished, too suspiciously perfect for her golden boy brother. She makes little digs about Roja's do-gooder brand, about the Moretti money, smelling like bleach and old blood. You think you're watching a petty jealousy arc. It would be so easy to write her as the stereotypical chaotic girl thrown in to complicate the main couple. Instead, the writers layer in these tiny, unsettling tells, Leela's eyes on the security cameras instead of the horse douvres, the way she flinches, barely perceptible, whenever Rosa walks behind her, as if she's trained never to leave her back exposed. She isn't just defensive. She's alive in the language of danger, in the way people moving through rooms create lines of attack and escape. The first real jolt between Rosa and Leela doesn't come in some big screaming fight. It happens around a coat check. I love how small the moment is. Towards the end of the gala, Rosa steps into the courtroom alone. The lighting is different in there, fluorescent, unflattering, like a backstage reality cutting through all the golden glow. She opens a locker, and there it is, the old life tucked away like a dirty secret. Not literally her tactical gear yet, we are not there, but a plain black duffel bag with her childhood initials stitched inside. She touches it with this strange tenderness, thumb lingering on the fray of the fabric. That's when Leela's voice says, expecting someone, from the doorway. No big music sting, nothing melodramatic. Just two women in a cramped space, both aware the other one doesn't belong in the picture they've painted of themselves. It's in that cramped little room that we get one of the nastiest, sharpest exchanges of the early episodes. Leela, half smiling, asks about the bag. Rosa lies without missing a beat, old sports stuff. Leela looks her up and down, still polite but with that predator's squint, and says, "You don't strike me as someone who plays games." The show lingers on Roja's face a second too long. Isabella Conti does this micro-expression where she almost laughs, like she recognizes something of herself in Leela's posture. For just a flash, you see the Reaper sizing up another wolf. Then Rosa tucks a strand of hair behind her ear, exactly like in all the society pages, and says, "You'd be surprised." From there the season starts threading its real plot, and it's not subtle about it. Greyport's power is carved up between three major families, the Morettis, who used to run guns and now run container ships, the Devrieuxes, who laundered their dirty money into a temple of philanthropy, and the Valdez cartel, which is newer, hungrier, and far less interested in playing polite. Rosa's father, Domenico Moretti, played with this very gravitas by Giancarlo Rossi, is the man everyone thinks orchestrated the Reaper killing and then scrubbed his daughter's hands clean with charity money. He's the old lion limping around his territory, still dangerous, but very aware the hunters are closing in. And those hunters include people at his own future son-in-law's dinner table. The show reveals the assassination plot gently at first, almost like background noise. In the second episode, Rosa overhears half a conversation in the powder room, some politician talking about making space at the top. In the third, we see a quick, out-of-focus shot of her father's face on a corkboard in some dim little Mexico bar, overlaid with red string. It isn't until episode 4 that it clicks for Rosa that this isn't just regular mob angst, it's a coordinated effort to take her father off the board, timed suspiciously close to her wedding. What finally tips her over into done pretending is such a perfect little domino of details that I honestly want to high-five the writer's room. She's in her dressing room, getting fitted for the final wedding dress. There's this airy montage of silk, champagne, her bridal stylist chirping about purity and reinvention. The camera slowly narrows in on Rosa's neck while someone fastens a string of pearls. Under the pearls, you catch the faded edge of a thin white scar. The stylist gasps, asks about it. Rosa says, in that airy society voice, childhood accident. Smash cut to a grainy flashback, 13-year-old Rosa in that wine-red dress, the recoil from the gun throwing her back into a glass display, shattering. Blood and diamonds everywhere. Back in the present, Rosa's face stays serene. Inside, you can feel the math. Then Evan's phone buzzes. This is where the show quietly changes gear. Up to now, Evan has been primarily a lens on Rosa's performance. But in this scene, the camera stays on him for once as he steps out to take the call. We don't hear everything that's said, because the audio dips under the swelling score, but we catch the important parts. No, I told you, we do this my way. He doesn't move until the union votes. The old man has to be there. The old man is Domenico, you don't need subtitles for that. Evan hangs up, looks at himself in the hallway mirror, and there's this flicker of something ugly, not malice, exactly, but that cold ambition you sometimes see in politicians when they've decided that someone else's blood is just the cost of a plan. Then he straightens his tie and walks back in to compliment Rosa's dress. This is the man she's planning to promise her life to. Here's where my personal reaction kicked in harder than I expected. There's a shot of Rosa watching Evan re-enter the room, his face warm and open. Her own face a perfect mask. We, the audience, know what he just said, what he's involved in. She doesn't, not yet. But the show does something cruel and brilliant, it makes you complicit. You start asking yourself, if I were her, if I knew, what would I do? And because we've seen 13-year-old Rosa shoot a man in a crowded restaurant, we kind of already know the answer. The question isn't whether she'll pick up the gun again. It's who she will point it at. The real turn, the click from lady to Reaper, comes not when she finds out the whole plot, but when she realizes that her politeness is part of how they think they can kill her father. There's a boardroom scene around the middle of the season that might actually be my favorite in the show. No blood, no bullets, just a table, a glass wall overlooking the harbor, and a bunch of men explaining to Rosa how the Moretti shipping empire will be restructured after Domenico retires. They use all the right buzzwords, legacy, modernization, optics, and they keep calling her princess in that way that sounds affectionate but is meant to flatten. Rosa smiles and takes notes while her father struggles to follow the legalese. She watches Evan gently rephrase clauses as if he's doing them a favor. And something curdles behind her eyes. You can almost hear the last patience snap when one of the shareholders says, "Of course, your father's health has us all concerned. Accidents happen." It's such a pointed line that even Domenico picks up on it. He shifts in his chair, fingers tapping out a beat on the armrest. The camera doesn't cut to Rosa immediately. It lingers on those fingers, on the old man's jaw tightening, like the show is paying respect to the generation that built this ugly kingdom before zooming in on the new queen. When it finally lands on Rosa, her smile has reached this frightening level of brightness. That's always the warning sign with her: the happier she looks, the higher the body count later. That night is when she opens the closet. The closet scene is the beating heart of the title. In her apartment, away from the Devereux family estate and the hovering wedding planners, Rosa has one space that's entirely hers. It's a walk-in, of course, rows of dresses, an entire shelf of handbags, shoes lined up with military precision. The lighting is soft, almost reverent. She walks past all of it, expression unreadable, until she reaches the back panel. It looks like just another mirrored wall, but she presses a hidden latch at the base and the whole thing slides open with a muted mechanical thunk. Inside, a second, much smaller closet. Black instead of cream. Tactical gear instead of tulle. The way the show shoots this moment is pure cinema pornography for anyone who likes transformation scenes. The camera traces the contour of body armor folded with the same care as ball gowns. It lingers on the gleam of a disassembled handgun laid out like jewelry, the matte black of noise-cancelling earplugs in a velvet box. Her old ski mask, the one she wore at 13, is there too, tucked into a corner like a childhood toy. Rosa reaches for the gun, then stops, fingers hovering an inch above the barrel. Her hand shakes, not from fear of the weapon, but from the fear of what it means if she picks it up. Isabella Conti lets that battle play out entirely in her jawline. It's one of those close-ups where you can see years of therapy and etiquette lessons and carefully built public image shudder under the weight of one simple desire: control. Then she grips the gun. And the music just dies. I love that choice. No triumphant score, no edgy guitar riff. Just dead air, a faint hum from the apartment fridge in the background, maybe the distant wail of a siren outside. Rosa slides the magazine in with the mechanical familiarity of someone who could do it blindfolded. She all-checks the barrel, tests the weight, and for the first time in 10 years, she breathes like she's not suffocating. You realize that for her, the gun isn't just a tool of violence, it's the only object in her life that has never lied to her. Every dress, every pearl, every press photo has been a performance. The gun has always been what it is: power, neutral and terrible and honest. From this point, the show's pacing changes. Earlier episodes had this languid, prestige TV rhythm, slow conversations in ritzy restaurants, establishing shots of the port, the occasional flashback nightmare. After the closet, scenes start snapping like the slide of that gun. Cuts are quicker, cross-cutting between gala rehearsals and nighttime surveillance. We watch Rosa do completely mundane socialite things: cake tastings, menu planning, picking floral arrangements, and then, in the same episode, we watch her break into a Walder's stash house in full tactical black to plant bugs. The contrast isn't just stylistic, it's a conversation about femininity and rage. She's literally planning her wedding and her murder mission in parallel. One of the most satisfying early missions is the parking garage ambush, and I want to linger on it because it shows just how committed the show is to sensory detail and character psychology. The setup: Roja's discovered the name of a mid-level Valdez accountant who seems to know too much about Moretti shipping routes. She arranges a chance meeting by having one of her foundations sponsor the charity he handles the books for, then insists on a late-night logistic review in the very public, very secure underground parking of a fancy hotel. At least, that's what he thinks is happening. Visually, it's pure noir. Sodium vapor lights flicker on concrete pillars, rainwater drips from the ceiling into slick, all-sheened puddles. The sound design goes all in, every footstep echoes, each car door slam ricochets into the empty corners. Rosa shows up in a white trench coat, the picture of a slightly overworked philanthropist, apologies spilling easily from her mouth about the late hour. She holds a clipboard, not a gun. Her hair is up. If you didn't know the title, you'd think she was there to sign checks and go home. Then a motorcycle backfires somewhere above, and the accountant flinches too hard. It's such a tiny thing, but the show zooms in on it. Roja's eyes track that flinch, then flick to his right hand, which is hovering a little too close to his jacket. Time slows. The ambient garage noise dims. We see the mental calculus she runs, angle of approach, distance, weight difference. She laughs at something he says, stepping closer as if to read a line on his paper. That's when he goes for his gun. He's fast, panicked, draws sloppily from under his arm. Rosa is faster. The choreography in this scene is brutally clean. She drops the clipboard, uses the movement to step inside his reach, slams his wrist into the car door with a crack that you can feel in your own bones. The gun skitters under the SUV. She doesn't go for it. Instead, she drives her elbow into his throat, once, twice, not enough to crush the windpipe but enough to shut him up. He stumbles. She catches him by the lapels, pinning him against the car, face inches from his. And that's when the Reaper comes out of her eyes. The warm, societally appropriate concern vanishes. What's left is cold evaluation. The show could have gone full torture porn here. Instead, it keeps it grounded and chilling. She whispers, "You brought a gun to a charity meeting," like a hurt hostess scolding a rude guest. Then, almost kindly, "Did my fiancé's family tell you I wouldn't get my hands dirty?" He tries to speak, she presses her thumb into the side of his throat, just so, cutting off air, watching his eyes bulge with this clinical curiosity. When she finally eases up, he coughs out the information she needs, the date, the peer, the fact that someone inside the Devereux network is coordinating with Valdez. She thanks him. And then she shoots him in the knee instead of the head. That's one of the show's nastiest little moral stabs, because it tells you something about Rosa that's worse than if she'd killed him instantly. She's learning restraint, but in the vicious, strategic sense. She's not the impulsive 13-year-old who shot to kill in panic and rage. She's an adult who understands that a wounded body and a terrified mind can be more useful than a corpse. She leaves him there with his ruined knee, anonymous call to emergency services made from a burner phone, and walks back to her car. As she removes her white trench coat, we see the black tactical sleeves underneath. She's layered both lives on top of each other, literally and figuratively. Some viewers have called the show's violence gratuitous, and I get where that reaction comes from. It does not flinch from blood or from the sound of bones breaking. But I actually think the violence is one of the more honest things about the narrative. It never feels like spectacle for spectacle's sake. Every act of harm Rosa inflicts bounces back on her, emotionally or strategically. After the parking garage, we see her in the bath, arms submerged, just staring at the water as if expecting the blood to show up. The camera doesn't do the cliché close-up of her crying. It holds a mid-shot, watching her breathing hitch, the little tremor in her fingers. She's not numb. She's compartmentalizing. And every time she does it, the compartments get a little leakier. Where the show really sings, for me, is in the relationships at the center of all this scheming. Rosa and her father have this knot of love, resentment, and loyalty that would be enough to build a whole series on even without guns. Domenico is very aware that he turned his child into a weapon. There's a brutal dinner scene early on where he tries, in his clumsy patriarch way, to apologize without ever using the word sorry. He tells her, "Back then, I thought keeping you alive was enough." She answers, "You didn't keep me alive. You just taught me how to kill first." It's one of those lines that hangs in the air like smoke. He doesn't dispute it. He just pours her a glass of wine, hands trembling slightly. The complexity in their bond is that Rosa genuinely loves him. This isn't the trope of the cold-hearted mob daughter turning on her evil father. She laughs at his bad jokes, she worries when his coughing fits last too long, she tucks a blanket around him when he falls asleep in front of the late-night news. The show takes the time to show those tiny, domestic, tender moments in between all the plotting, which makes the fact that half the city is trying to blow his head off land harder. It's not about daddy issues in the cheap sense, it's about the way people who have hurt you can also be your only real home. The cinematography loves their scenes together. Domenico's office is this dark wood cave full of ledgers and old photos, lit mostly by desk lamps and the glow from the harbor window. When Rosa visits, the whole color palette warms slightly, not because the room changes, but because the light wraps around them differently. There's this later shot where she stands behind his chair, both of them reflected in the glass, the container ships moving like silent whales in the background. On the glass, their reflections' eyes line up so they look like one face split in two. It's a little on the nose visually, but the image sticks. The third corner of Rosa's relational triangle is, of course, Leela. And if you think I'm going to ignore that simmering, volatile dynamic, you clearly don't know how much I love complicated female rivalries. From the jump, Rosa and Leela are sizing each other up like apex predators thrown into the same enclosure. Leela openly mocks the charity galas. Rosa quietly notes Leela's habit of always sitting with her back to a wall at family dinners. They're both hyper-aware of Evan's presence between them, not as a romantic prize, the show is smarter than that, but as a moral tether. For Rosa, Evan is the life she's supposed to choose if she wants to be better. For Leela, Evan is the person who rescued her from the streets, the one human who has never tried to use her. The thought of Rosa dragging him back into blood terrifies and infuriates her. One of my favorite smaller scenes is when Rosa finds Leela in the Deveriak's garage tinkering with a battered motorcycle. It's late, everyone else is asleep or pretending to be. The lighting is all cold fluorescence, stark, honest. Rosa comes down because she can't sleep. The planning, the lies, the weight of the gun back in her life have her too wired to rest. She finds Leela with grease-stained hands and an open beer, humming along to some punk track under her breath. Their conversation starts snippy. Leela makes a crack about Princess in the Dragon's Lair. Rosa retorts with a pointed comment about Leela sabotaging social events. But then the tone shifts. Leela mentions, half offhand, that she's got an early meeting downtown. Rosa catches the slip. No one willingly goes downtown in Greyport unless there's something they can't do on the north side. She pokes. Funny, I thought you were jobless. Leela's jaw tightens. I work. I just don't get paid in money. There's so much resentment packed into that one line, resentment at being taken in as a charity case, at being expected to be grateful and harmless. Rosa recognizes it. She's been packaged as a human redemption story her whole life. That garage scene is the first time they see each other clearly. Rosa, very quietly, asks, "Who owns you?" Leela fires back, "Do you even know who owns you?" And for a heartbeat, there's this electric mutual recognition. Oh. You're not just decorative. You're dangerous too. The show doesn't play it like instant trust. It plays it like spotting another shark in the water and recalibrating your swim. Around the midway point of the series, the show drops one of its juiciest twists. Leela isn't just a cynical hanger-on. She's been working as a confidential informant for a small, underfunded task force inside Greyport PD that still believes in something like justice. She was approached years ago, back when she was 15 and picked up in a Waldo's warehouse raid. Instead of doing juvenile time, she cut a deal, feed them scraps from the Deveriak's world in exchange for her freedom and some protection. Protection, of course, that turns out to be paper-thin once she's poking around families as big as the Moretis and Devriakses. I know some people found the undercover informant angle too convenient, but here's my mildly contrarian take. It works not because it's a shock twist, but because it explains so much retroactively about how Leela moves. Her obsession with exits, her familiarity with low-level cops, the way she always seems to know when a raid is coming, that's not just street smarts, that's someone juggling multiple masters. And crucially, she's not a saint about it. She lies to the cops when it suits her. She feeds them just enough Waldo's info to keep her handlers happy while carefully shielding even from anything that might touch him. It's protection, but in the warped, traumatized version where you decide you are the only one who knows what's good for everyone. The way the show reveals Leela's status to the audience is slick. There's this scene where she gets picked up outside a dive bar, shoved into the back of a squad car, and you think, oh, here we go, she's finally getting busted. Then the camera cuts to the inside of an anonymous conference room, fluorescent lights buzzing, a cheap flag in the corner. She's sitting across from Detective Lena Park, who is clearly exhausted and quietly furious with her. "You missed the meet last week," Lena says. Leela shrugs, spins a coffee cup. "Family dinner. You try slipping out of those without someone checking your phone." It's their rhythm, Lena pushing for more, Leela deflecting with sarcasm, both of them pretending this arrangement isn't going to get someone killed. What's particularly nice is that Rosa doesn't find out about Leela's informant status right away. We live with this double-layer tension for a few episodes, Rosa sneaking around in black tactical gear to protect her father, Leela sneaking around in her own way to protect even and, in her mind, the city. Neither of them knows the other is in the shadow economy of secrets, they just keep tripping over each other's interference. An informant gets spooked, a wire goes dark, a planned hit mysteriously turns into a last-minute cancelled meeting. There's this sense that the city is full of ghost hands nudging pieces on the board, and our girls are getting very, very tired of being surprised. In terms of craft, the show does something very clever with its editing during this stretch. It starts cross-cutting between Rosa's and Leela's nightly routines as if they're two sides of the same coin. Rosa stripping off her ball gown, revealing bruises from some scuffle we didn't fully see, juxtaposed with Leela peeling off her leather jacket to tend to a knife cut on her forearm. Rosa cleaning a gun in that hidden closet, Leela swapping a dead burner phone SIM card in a grimy public bathroom. It builds a parallel without ever saying, "Look, they're the same." It lets us feel that echo. So when they finally collide in a big way, it doesn't feel forced, it feels inevitable. I want to talk about one more key set piece in this first stretch, the Harbor Festival, because it's where all these threads start knotting into something really tense, and the direction and sound work are just asterisk chef's kiss star. Greyport holds this annual festival at the docks, all lanterns and cheap beer and fireworks, allegedly to celebrate the city's maritime heritage but really to move product and buy influence under the cover of civic pride. This year, of course, the Morettis are sponsoring a youth scholarship at the main stage, the Deverieux Foundation has a VIP tent, and Valdez enforcers are prowling the edges in knockoff festival t-shirts. Rosa attends in full public mode, giving speeches, kissing babies, all that. Underneath the summer dress, we see the outline of a holster. Her father is supposed to make a brief appearance on stage, a symbolic show that, despite rumors about his health and relevance, he's still in play. Even is there too, hand at her back, doing his earnest politician rounds. Meanwhile, Leela is working a very different angle. She's arranged to meet Detective Park in the press of the crowd, pass off a USB loaded with shipment schedules that could finally tie Valdez to specific violent incidents. All three of them are moving through the same crowded, noisy space with completely different missions and partial information. It's the kind of setup where everything can and will go wrong. The Harbor Festival episode is the one where I realized how good this director is with sound. They layer it like a weapon. The constant thump of bass from the main stage, the overlapping chatter, food vendors yelling, distant foghorns, it creates this almost overwhelming sensory field. Over that, we get these sudden little pockets of silence whenever Rosa or Leela's attention snaps to something important. Rosa spotting a glint on a rooftop, the music dulls for a beat as her eyes track it, then rushes back in when she decides it's just a camera lens, not a sniper scope. Leela seeing a familiar Valdez lieutenant in the crowd, the laughter of teenagers becomes this muffled roar as adrenaline kicks her hearing sideways. There's a moment in the middle of the chaos where Rosa and Leela literally bump into each other near the edge of the pier. For a second, they're framed against the black water, fireworks soft popping in the distance, lantern light painting their faces red and gold. Leela's fist is clenched around the USB. Rosa's hand rests, very lightly, on the small of her back where her gun is hidden. They trade barbed pleasantries, each probing for hints of what the other is actually doing there. It's delicious. Then, somewhere behind them, a flare goes up, a prearranged signal in the assassination plan neither of them fully knows about yet. Both their heads snap toward it in perfect sync. The show is screaming, they are on the same battlefield, whether they like it or not. By the end of the festival sequence, nothing has actually exploded yet, and that's the impressive part. The writers show restraint. They let this be the night where all the dominoes get lined up, not the night they all fall. Someone fires a warning shot off screen, we don't see where it lands. Domenico has a minor health scare on stage that could be natural or induced, we are not told. Avaldo's boat leaves the harbor 15 minutes earlier than scheduled. A cop car cruises by, its lights off but engine humming. Everyone goes home with their nerves scraped raw. It's less about plot resolution and more about atmosphere, the sense that the city is swelling towards some kind of rupture. Let me be very honest, this is also where I started to feel slightly frustrated, in a good way, with Rosa. Up until now, she's been this almost mythic figure, the Reaper under silk. But the more she entangles herself in the counter-scheming, the more humanly messy she gets. She makes mistakes. She misses cues because she's trying to protect too many people at once. There's a scene right after the festival where she confronts one of her father's old lieutenants in a warehouse, trying to squeeze out names of conspirators, and she overplays her hand. She threatens a man who genuinely still worships her father, and the hurt on his face when he stammers, "We would die for him," Ragadja, cuts deep. Her assumption that everyone is as slippery as she is backfires. It's a necessary stumble, otherwise she'd be too invincible to care about. Visually, the show continues to flex through all this. One thing I haven't mentioned yet is the way it uses color to track Rosa's internal alignment. In the early, heavily lady episodes, she wears a lot of whites, creams, soft blues, the palette of innocence and respectability. Once she opens the closet, black starts creeping into her daytime wardrobe, a belt here, a collar there, a pair of dark gloves, because it's chilly. At the Harbor Festival, her dress is this vivid blood orange red that's half warning flare, half battle standard. The more she leans into the Reaper again, the more the world around her desaturates, the gilded rooms feel colder, the harbor grayer. It's a subtle visual progression, but if you binge it you really feel the slide. The music also deserves praise. The score blends mournful strings with industrial percussion in a way that mirrors Greyport's whole identity crisis, old Europe elegance laid over rusted American infrastructure. Roja's motif is this three-note cello phrase that first plays when she kills at 13. Every time it repeats in the present, it's slightly altered. Sometimes it's played on piano in a major key when she's doing charity work, like her past has been sanitized. Sometimes it's warped through a SYNTH when she's stalking someone in a dark alley. By the time she openly acknowledges the Reaper inside her to someone else, and I won't say exactly when or to whom, the motif comes back in raw, unadorned cello, like all the noise and pretense have been burned off. Performance-wise, Isabella Conti carries so much of this on her shoulders that it almost isn't fair to everyone else, but the ensemble is solid. Her Rosa is never a caricature of the tiny badass. They lean into how small she is, physically, how easily people underestimate her because her bones are delicate and her cheeks are still round when she smiles. There's a scene where she has to intimidate a dockworker twice her height, and instead of trying to out-tough him, she just holds eye contact a second too long, stands a little too close, makes him feel how unbothered she is by his size. It's psychological warfare, not a Marvel training montage. Finhart, as even, grows on you in a sneaky way. At first I thought he was miscast, too soft, too earnest, but I realized that was exactly the point. His even has this boyishness that makes his involvement in the darker conspiracies feel all the more upsetting. When he sits across from a shady city councilman and calmly lays out why, transitioning the Moretti docks to new ownership will limit bloodshed, he believes it. He's not twirling a mustache, he's genuinely convinced he's steering the city toward a better, cleaner future. The tragedy is that his road there requires stepping over Rosa's father, and by extension, Rosa herself. The show doesn't let him off the hook, but it also doesn't turn him into a cartoon villain. It lets him be wrong in that awful, relatable way where idealism curdles into cruelty because you don't want to admit your hands are dirty. Amara chose Leela is, honestly, the one who might stick in your brain the longest. She's one of those characters who's always in motion, leg bouncing, fingers drumming, eyes flicking from corner to corner, until the rare moments when she goes still, and then you really worry. Her humor is a defense mechanism, obviously, but the show also lets her be genuinely funny. There's one bit where she's in a police van wired up with mics for a sting operation, muttering commentary on the detective's terrible coffee and lack of snacks, and it feels like the gallows humor version of someone live-tweeting their own potential kidnapping. It punches a tiny hole in the tension without deflating it, which is a hard balance to strike. I'll confess something personal here. I had a moment around episode 6 where I had to pause and walk around my apartment because the show hit a little too close to home. There's a scene where Rosa stands in front of a mirror, pulling on a dress for yet another public appearance, and she just disconnects. You see her face go slack, her hands going through the motions of zipping, smoothing, pinning her hair, while her eyes don't quite focus. The sound muffles, that same muffled quality from the opening. It's one of the more accurate portrayals I've seen of disassociation in a glamorous context. As someone who's done the whole, functioning, put-together adult thing while my brain was quietly on fire, there was something uncomfortably familiar about that. The show nails that feeling of performing your life so hard you drift a few inches outside your own body. Thematically, Done Being a Lady Time to Shoot is playing with a lot, inherited violence, the performance of femininity, the myth of clean power, the way cities chew up girls and spat them back out as warnings. But if I had to distill it, I'd say its core obsession is the question, who gets to change? Rosa has done monstrous things. She was also a child when she was primed and pushed into them. 10 years of charity work doesn't erase the blood on her hands, but it also isn't meaningless. Meanwhile, you have men like Ivan's father, the very polite, very dangerous Malcolm de Vereux, who built their empires on bodies and now get to be called philanthropists because the statues in their names look nice. The city forgives some monsters and not others, based largely on who throws the better gala. The show is very aware of that hypocrisy, and it lets Rosa's rage at it simmer and spit. At the same time, it refuses to let Rosa hide behind her trauma. There's a late mid-season conversation with Leela, once some of their secrets have begun to leak, where Leela basically tells her, being a victim doesn't stop you from being a bully. It's one of the hardest lines anyone throws at Rosa, and it lands. She's been wielding her pain like a shield against accountability. Being reminded that she's capable of hurting people who had nothing to do with her original wound is a turning point. I appreciated the show for having that nuance. It doesn't reduce her to either poor damaged girl or cool assassin lady. She's both and more, and neither in any given scene. We've talked a lot about Rosa, Ivan, Leela, and Domenico, but the city itself functions as a character too, and it's worth acknowledging. Greyport always looks slightly damp, even in the summer episodes, streets shiny with recent rain, air hazy from the mix of sea mist and industrial exhaust. The harbor is omnipresent, cranes looming in the background of so many shots like mechanical sentinels. There's a recurring motif of birds, too, gulls circling over the labs where Valdez cooks its product, pigeons massing on the roof of the de Vereux Foundation, a lone cormorant on a buoy when someone's body is dumped. It gives the place this sense of being watched by things that don't care, that will keep soaring whether these human empires stand or crumble. One thing I haven't touched yet, and that might be a deciding factor for some viewers, is the show's pacing around the legal, political subplots. We get quite a bit of time in city council meetings, union halls, courtrooms where shipping regulations are argued. If you're here strictly for Rosa shooting people in high heels, those sequences might feel like speed bumps. Personally, I like them. They ground the stakes in something more systemic. The assassination plots and ambushes are not just about personal grudges, they're about who controls trade, labor, housing. There's a particularly sharp sequence where a dockworkers' strike, orchestrated by one faction, intersects with a planned hit, and the chaos of picket lines and riot cops provides cover for other activities. It's messy and kind of brilliant. From an aesthetic standpoint, those civic scenes are shot differently, too. More handheld camera work, flatter lighting, less romantic framing. It feels like you've suddenly switched channels to a more conventional political drama, which only makes it more jarring when Rosa or Leela walks into those spaces, carrying the heightened, almost operatic intensity of the criminal underworld with them. It's like watching mythological creatures in a City Hall budget meeting. By the time we edge toward the back half of the season, all the separate threads, the assassination plot against Domenico, Ivan's vision for Greyport, Valder's encroachment, Leela's informant work, Roja's relapse into the Reaper, are wound so tight that any small move snaps something. It's a testament to the writers that they keep the logic of it understandable even as the web thickens. We understand why Valdez would rather absorb the Moretti docs than blow them up, why Malcolm DeVereux would prefer a clean, tax investigation that leads to a quiet heart attack over a public shooting, why Rosa, against all common sense, refuses to just grab her father and disappear. This also means that the second half gets heavier, morally and emotionally. Choices start to have irreversible consequences. Casualties aren't just nameless henchmen anymore. Relationships fracture in ways you can't easily mend. I won't go into the specifics of who betrays whom and how, that's where the moderate spoiler line comes in, but I will say that the show is not afraid to let its protagonist be lonely, and it's not afraid to let some of her worst fears come true. The Reaper doesn't get to control everything, even when she's holding the gun. And somewhere in that tightening spiral, Rosa does something I didn't entirely expect from the opening. She asks for help. Not from Ivan, by the time she's really in over her head, that bridge is a little too charred. Not from her father, his sense of honor and his failing heart make him a liability for certain kinds of plans. Who she reaches for, and what that costs both of them, is one of the more satisfying emotional beats of the show's backstretch, and I'll dig into that tangled dynamic, as well as how the series handles its climactic violence and the question of whether someone like Rosa can ever really be done with being a lady or with shooting, when we keep going deeper into the story. That ask for help moment comes on a night when Rosa is, by all her old rules, supposed to be alone. She's back in that hidden closet, still in an evening gown, fingers trembling just enough that she has to take a breath before she can load the magazine. The Reaper ritual has become almost normal again, waistband holster, thigh knife, hairpin so it doesn't fall into her eyes. The mission is simple on paper. Valdez is holding a private auction in an abandoned cannery. The rumor is that one of her father's capos is selling shipping manifests to the highest bidder. Roja's going to crash the party and make very clear that the Moretti docs are not for sale. This is the old rhythm: find, confront, terrify. Maybe kill if she has to. No witnesses. But when she stands in the doorway, ready to leave, she hesitates. She glances back into her empty apartment, to the pristine kitchen, the framed photos with Ivan, the neat stack of charity event folders on her table, all the props of her other life. And she says, almost under her breath, I can't do this alone again. It's quiet, and nobody answers, which is kind of the point. Rosa's universe has always been a closed loop, her father, a gun. Breaking that loop feels more dangerous than any bullet. The person she calls is Leela. It's such a beautifully stubborn choice. Not her father, not some old Moretti enforcer she trusts, not even the one semi-corrupt cop she's met. She calls the girl who's been a thorn in her side since episode 1, the one who knows how Ivan thinks, the one who can move through Greyport's back alleys without anyone looking twice. Leela picks up on the second ring, her voice hoarse like she's just woken up even though we see that she's actually in a bar bathroom, staring down at a text from Detective Park about an upcoming sting. Rosa doesn't explain everything on the phone, she gives a time, an address, a clipped, I need a driver I can trust who isn't on anyone's payroll. There's a beat of silence, and then Leela laughs. You don't even trust your own fiancé's driver? Rosa smiles, a weird, tight little thing. Especially not him. That's the first time Rosa really admits, out loud, that she doesn't trust Ivan's world. It's a tiny crack, but once it's spoken, you can't unhear it. The cannery sequence is one of those mid-season set pieces where you can feel the show sliding into its final movement. Night on the docks again, but this time we are inland, among old brick factories with broken windows like missing teeth. Leela pulls up in a beaten-up sedan that doesn't belong anywhere near a Moretti operation, dressed in an oversized hoodie, hair tucked under a cap. Rosa in the passenger seat looks like a ghost slipped into a slumming body, black jumpsuit under a long coat, face bare of the usual careful makeup. They sit there for a moment, engine idling, both staring at the blank building ahead like it might bite. The banter is sharp, defensive. Leela asks, "You sure this isn't a trap for you?" Rosa fires back, "If it is, I'd rather you be the one at the wheel." Leela snorts. "I'm not your getaway girl?" Rosa's answer is quite enough that Leela almost misses it. "You're the only one who might drive away instead of straight into the ocean." For all the sarcasm, there's a core of trust slowly, reluctantly forming here, and the show milks that tension. These two women have spent half a season circling each other, and now they're about to walk into a kill box together. Rosa goes in, Leela waits in the car, but of course that doesn't last. Inside, the cannery is a maze of rusted catwalks and old fish-cutting lines, lit by portable work lamps. The Valdez crew have set up folding tables like some twisted neighborhood garage sale, guns, ledgers, jewelry, a couple of terrified low-level guys being offered as employees with experience. Rosa navigates the shadows like she was born in them, which, in a way, she was. Her target, the capo who's supposed to be selling out her father, is at the far end, laughing too loudly, his face shiny with sweat. She sees him palm a USB drive and pass it to a man with a Deveriux issue wristwatch. That's the moment she realizes how deep Evan's world is in this. She's so focused that she doesn't notice the second sniper on the mezzanine until a cheap laser sight jitters across her chest. The show plays the next few seconds with this exquisite, horrifying calm. We cut to Leela in the car, fidgeting with her lighter. The radio is on but low, some late-night DJ murmuring about tides. She glances at the building, then at the time, then pulls her hoodie tighter like she's trying to smother her own anxiety. Back inside, Rosa feels the heat of the laser, looks down at the little red dot like it's an insect landed on her sternum. She breathes. Then she moves. The sequence that follows is one of those rare TV gunfights that actually feels like it knows how guns work. Rosa doesn't become a superhero. She dives behind a metal vat, the first shot slams into the rust with a bone-rattling clang, everyone in the room panics. Crates topple, someone starts screaming, a lamp blows out. In the chaos, we cut to the mezzanine and see, for the first time, the shooter's face. It's a Valdez man we saw briefly earlier shaking Evan's hand at a fundraiser. The overlap between worlds isn't metaphorical anymore, it's staring straight down the barrel. Leela, outside, hears the gunshots. There's that split second of drive away and pretend you heard fireworks. She even puts the car in reverse. Then she slams it back into park, curses so creatively I wanted to write them down, and bolts out, pulling a compact pistol from under the driver's seat. This is the first time Rosa sees Leela armed. That moment of surprise, when they lock eyes through the broken cannery window, Rosa crouched behind cover, Leela silhouetted in the doorway, lands with a real jolt. All this time, they've both been trying to pretend the other was some harmless adjunct to the men. Now they see each other clearly, gunwomen, not accessories. Their impromptu tag team in the cannery is messy, improvised, and weirdly beautiful. Leela lays down wild, loud cover fire, not particularly accurate but enough to keep heads down. Rosa uses the distraction to flank, climbing onto some creaking conveyor, moving like a ghost above the chaos. The camera alternates between their POVs, Rosa's, which is all angels and threat assessments, and Leela's, which is more chaotic, tinged with genuine fear and that grim, I can't let him die for me, determination she normally reserves for Evan. For the first time, she aims that protectiveness at someone else. They manage to get out alive, but the cost is high. The Deveriux watchman escapes with the USB. The Moretti capo bleeds out on the dirty floor, gasping an apology to Domenico that never reaches him. And Leela, in the rush to drag Rosa to the exit, gets grazed by a bullet. It's not life-threatening, but the sight of her blood on Rosa's hands is a potent, ugly mirror of the show's opening, somebody else's life cracking open in Rosa's palms. Back in the sedan, adrenaline crashing, Leela slumps against the seat, clutching her shoulder. Rosa rips open her hoodie to check the wound, efficient and surprisingly gentle. That's when she sees it, the wire taped along Leela's ribcage, the tiny mic, the little blinking transmitter. There's this long, electric beat where they just look at each other. Leela's eyes screen, don't say anything. Rosa's fingers hover over the wire, then curl into a fist. She doesn't rip it off. That's the fascinating choice. Instead, very softly, she says into the mic, "You got what you needed, detective." The sound design goes dead quiet, we can almost hear the cops on the other end hold their breath. Leela swears under hers. And Rosa adds, perfectly calm, "If you ever send her in without backup again, I'll come for you before I come for Valdez." Do you understand? It's a threat delivered to someone she's never met, and yet you believe it. This is where Detective Lena Park and Rosa's stories finally cross. We cut to Park's end of that conversation, a shitty fluorescent-lit van, equipment humming, Lena with headphones on, eyes wide. You see a cop who thought she was dealing with one morally grey asset in Leela suddenly realize there's a much bigger monster in the room, one who might, under very specific conditions, be on the same side. You can practically hear the gears grinding in her head. How do I use that without getting everyone killed? Lena becomes a fascinating tertiary character in the back half. She's one of those true believer detectives who should have burned out years ago but somehow hasn't. Her captain thinks she's wasting departmental resources chasing myths like the Reaper and trying to take down entire families instead of settling for easy callers. She knows her informant, Leela, is skating the edge of self-destruction. And now she has evidence that Rosa Moretti is not just the traumatized charity princess she appears to be. Lena's scenes with Leela, especially after the cannery, carry this heavy mix of affection, exasperation, and fear. She doesn't want to turn Leela into another Rosa, but she's not sure there's a gentle path out of this city's chokehold. Rosa, for her part, has no interest in being a cop's pet vigilant. If anything, the discovery of Leela's wire makes her double down on her core belief: institutions will not save her father. People with guns and nerves of steel might. Still, she doesn't cut Leela loose, and that was a pleasant narrative surprise. A lazier show would have made Rosa throw her out of the car, spit "traitor," and storm off solo. Instead, you get this brittle new honesty between them. Leela admits, in a halting, pissed-off way, that she's been feeding info to Lena for years. Rosa admits, in her own cold way, that she's been killing to protect her father since she was 13. The car smells like blood and burnt brake pads, and they conduct this emotional nuclear exchange like they're talking about weather. What makes their gradual alliance work is that neither of them suddenly becomes good. They just start being strategically honest. Leela's priority remains even. She wants to dismantle Valdez, weaken Malcolm Deveriux's grip on city politics, and somehow keep her brother out of prison and out of a grave. Rosa's priority remains Domenico, keep him alive long enough to die on his own terms, not as a footnote in someone else's hostile takeover. The show smartly never pretends those priorities perfectly align. There are entire arguments about whose life is worth more, and yes, they use those exact ugly words. It's some of the rawest, most uncomfortable stuff in the drama, because it forces you, the viewer, to sit in that math too. One scene that really nails their dynamic happens in a cheap motel room that Leela sometimes uses as a crash pad. They're spread out on the bed and the floor, eating cold takeout, surrounded by printouts of shipment logs, city council voting records, photos of key players. It's like a murder board exploded onto a comforter with cigarette burns. Rosa is in mission mode, red pen in hand, drawing lines between names. Leela is pacing, talking too loud, venting about Park's latest "you are in too deep" warning. At one point Rosa says, "You talk to the cop because you need someone to tell you are still a good person." Leela snaps back, "You are confusing good with give a shit. They're not the same thing." That line hits Rosa harder than she lets on. The show cuts later that night to her alone at the motel sink, scrubbing her hands long after the blood is gone, staring at her reflection like she doesn't quite recognize whatever's staring back. Meanwhile, Evan is on his own collision course with the truth. The gradual dawning of his awareness is paced carefully. At first he just notices that Rosa is more tired, more distracted. She forgets a date, shows up late with an implausible excuse about a board meeting. Then comes the dress incident. He finds a designer gown in her closet with a bullet hole torn through the hem, hastily stitched up. His lawyer brain wants to rationalize it, probably mishap on a charity theater stage, maybe, but his gut knows better. When you've grown up around violence, even if you've spent a decade pretending otherwise, you recognize its debris. The scene where Evan confronts Rosa about the bullet hole is a quiet, devastating piece of acting. It doesn't happen in a dramatic thunderstorm or on the night of the big gala. It happens on a Sunday morning, sunlight clear and unforgiving, the kind of day they would normally use to browse farmers' markets and pretend they're just another wealthy couple. He holds up the dress, voice very level, and asks, "Is there something you want to tell me?" She looks at the torn fabric, then at him, and for a heartbeat you can see her seriously consider telling him everything. There's this ache in her expression, like she's so tired of swallowing herself down into palatable shapes. But she can't. Not because she doesn't trust him, exactly, but because she knows what it will do to him. Knowing the Reaper is one thing in legend. Knowing she sleeps in your bed is another. So she lies, badly. Something about a staged photo shoot for an anti-violence campaign, a prop that malfunctioned. Even calls her on the lie. His hands shake. "I don't recognize you when you talk like this," he says, and the hurt in his voice is worse than any shouted accusation. Finhart plays Evan as a man whose entire internal self-image is being dismantled piece by piece. He thought his life was a story about redemption through policy, about being the one Devereux who broke the cycle by moving from backroom deals to legislative reform. Realizing that he is, in multiple ways, still an instrument of blood, directly in the case of Domenico, indirectly through deals that empower Valdez, is like a spiritual organ failure. His scenes with Malcolm, his father, get icier. Malcolm, brilliantly understated by Jonathan Pryce, keeps insisting that this is how the world works and that Evan is simply too squeamish to accept the necessary dirty work. There's an awful, quiet dinner where Malcolm tells him, between bites of steak, if you want Rosa safe, you eliminate her father. He is the target on her back. Evan doesn't throw his glass or storm out. He just goes very, very still. The show doesn't make Evan some pure victim of manipulative parents, he makes choices. Some of them you will hate. There's a key moment, late in the season, where he signs a document that he knows will set in motion a chain of events likely to end with Domenico's accidental death. He tells himself it will be quick, less bloody than whatever Valdez has planned, that it will spare Rosa a slow erosion of her family's power and the inevitable war. He is, in his own mind, choosing the least monstrous option. That's where the show's moral sharpness really cuts. It lets you into that rationalization, then shows you the collateral. If there is one late-game sequence I have to talk about in detail, it's the shipyard showdown. Not the final confrontation, but the night when everything that's been hinted at all season finally crashes into open air. Domenico has agreed, under pressure, to attend a private inspection of a newly retrofitted container berth, ostensibly to reassure nervous investors. Rosa knows something is off. The invitation came through channels Malcolm usually reserves for political appearances, not business. Leela, from her side, has intercepted a fragmented police memo about a planned raid on that same berth, intel that came, suspiciously, not from Park but from another unit with murky ties to Valdez. Everyone smells a trap, but no one can pinpoint whose trap it is. Visually, the shipyard at night is terrifyingly beautiful. Tall cranes stand ghosted in sodium light, containers stacked like painted tombstones, the water beyond black and strangely still. The soundscape is mostly distant machinery hum and the occasional metallic groan as something settles. As Domenico arrives, flanked by a skeletal entourage of trusted old hands, Rosa shadows him at a distance, all in black, moving from cover to cover. Leela is somewhere up on the gantries, earpiece in, talking quietly to Park, who is sitting in an unmarked car biting her lip. Evan, we realize with a cold twist, is already present in one of the portable offices, nervously reviewing the inspection paperwork with Malcolm and a city inspector who clearly isn't there just to check fire exits. The build-up is excruciating in the best way. Shots of Roja's boot soles crunching gravel, Leela's breath steaming in the cold, Domenico cuffing into a handkerchief and checking his watch. Park, in the car, hears code phrases on the police scanner that signal SWAT teams moving in, except the units being called aren't hers. She tries to raise her captain, gets brushed off. It's the system quietly aligning to make something ugly look procedural. And then something small goes wrong. The city inspector, jittery and out of his depth, misreads a line in his script and refers to Terminal 3 instead of Berth 3. Domenico, who has spent his entire life on these docks, catches it immediately. His eyes narrow. He stops walking. Rosa, seeing him pause, steps out of the shadows for the first time, ignoring every plan about staying invisible. Their eyes meet across the concrete. There's a shared, silent understanding, this is it. The next minute unfolds like a detonator code burning towards something we can't quite see yet. From different corners of the yard, armed men start to emerge, some in Valdez colors, some in unmarked tactical gear, some with the stiff, tense movements of cops already blaming the paperwork for what they're about to do. Malcolm's voice comes over a portable radio, smooth and maddeningly calm, instructing someone to proceed with asset neutralization. Even flinches when he hears his father use that euphemism for the man whose daughter he loves. Park, realizing her informant is in the blast radius, abandons protocol altogether and floors it toward the gate. What follows is not a slick shootout choreography designed to make anyone look cool. It's chaos. Gunfire shatters the airy quiet. Containers ring like drums when bullets ricochet off them. People shout in 3 languages at once. A flare goes up, maybe as a signal, maybe as a panicked attempt at visibility, and bathes the whole yard in hellish red light. In that unholy glow, we see Rosa go to work. There's a moment where she physically shoves her father behind a stack of pallets, putting herself fully in the line of fire, and you can tell that every muscle memory from her teenage rampage is screaming in her veins. She moves with this precise brutality, using cover instinctively, picking shots only when she has a clear line, not wasting ammunition. Leela, high above, takes out a would-be sniper with a shot that surprises even herself, then nearly drops her gun when she sees who was in his sights. The camera doesn't show you directly, but the angle implies it, even, head ducked, running toward Rosa instead of away from her. That one decision will echo through the rest of the story. Park, crashing through the gate in her car, doesn't turn into some action hero savior. She almost gets killed immediately, pinned behind her open door as bullets strew the asphalt around her. What she does have, though, is a radio and just enough leverage to scream at Central that there are multiple civilians on site and that any unit that opens fire without proper identification is going to end their career in a very public investigation. It's thin protection, but in a city built on plausible deniability, sometimes the threat of paperwork is more powerful than a gun. I won't spoil exactly who walks out of that yard and who doesn't. The show makes some bold, painful choices there, and it earns them. What I will say is that the aftermath of the shipyard night is where, done being a lady time to shoot, really seals its identity. It's not just a crescendo of violence, it's the emotional reconfiguration that follows. Rosa emerges from that night scorched. She's no longer able to maintain the fiction that her two lives can be kept perfectly separate. The press sniffs around, the word Reaper starts appearing again in the darker corners of social media. Old cops start comparing shaky cell phone footage to case files from 10 years ago. She goes home, scrubs the blood off, puts on a silk blouse for a hastily arranged press conference, and you can see her pulling the lady mask back on like it's made of broken glass. Isabella Conti plays the press conference as a masterpiece of tension, Rosa's voice steady, her answers precise, her eyes dead. She talks about tragic violence and our commitment to peace in Greyport, and every syllable sounds like it's costing her a year of her life. It's around here that the show does something I really loved. It finally cracks open the full truth of her first kill. We've seen fragments throughout, the red dress, the flash of a gun, broken glass. But the episode after the shipyard uses a therapist's office as a frame to give us the complete picture. Yes, Rosa's been in therapy this whole time, her publicist made a big deal about mental health advocacy years ago, and somewhere in that performance, a real coping mechanism got built. Her therapist, Dr. Shah, has been around in earlier episodes, mostly as a sounding board for Rosa's rehearsed guilt. This time, Rosa drops the performance. There's no more bandwidth left for pretending. In that office, with the rain drumming on the window and her hands still faintly stained from scrubbing blood, Rosa recounts the night of her 13th birthday in full. The man she killed wasn't random. He was a mid-level rival who had made a bargain, Domenico, for a slice of the docks and a stash house. The meeting was arranged in a fancy restaurant, all very civilized. Rosa was there because Domenico believed his enemies wouldn't pull a gun in front of a child. He was wrong. When the man lunged for his pistol, Rosa was quicker. The show lingers on the detail that nobody had explicitly told her to kill him. They'd trained her. They'd exposed her to the mechanics of violence. But the choice to pull the trigger, in that second, was hers. The complexity of that truth, that she was at once manipulated and autonomous, is what she's been carrying for a decade. She didn't just witness violence, she authored it. And the city loves that story when it's a cautionary tale or a myth. It's much less comfortable with it as a living, breathing woman who might have opinions about shipping regulations. Here's where my surprising take instinct kicks in. A lot of viewers I've talked to framed Rosa's arc as one long, tragic slip back into monstrosity. She was on the right path, doing charity, trying to be good, and then the old trauma dragged her back. I don't totally buy that. I think the show is more cynical about what her lady face actually was. Those 10 years of Galas weren't pure redemption, they were also a way for the men around her to feel like they'd solved the Reaper problem without actually dismantling the world that created her. What we watch in the back half is not Rosa becoming bad again. It's Rosa refusing to stay within the palatable lanes laid out for her. That doesn't mean her choices are unproblematic, far from it. There's a late scene where she threatens an innocent woman, a judge's wife, to leverage a vote, and it's stomach-turning. She lays out, in clinical detail, how accidents can be arranged in bathtubs. The camera holds on her face afterwards, and Conti lets us see the self-disgust and the airy calm fighting in her. The show isn't cheering for that move. It's asking, when the system is this rigged, is there any way to fight without becoming something you hate? Leela offers a counterpoint, but not in a neat, saintly way. She screws up too. There's a devastating subplot where she thinks she can outmaneuver Valdez by tipping Park off to a minor exchange, not realizing it's a fine to identify leaks. People die. Park gets suspended, almost fired. Leela ends up sitting in an interrogation room, the walls closing in, as internal affairs hints at charging her as an accessory. It's one of the few times we see her truly scared, the swagger stripped away. And it's Rosa, of all people, who pulls strings and points a gun at the right bureaucrat to get her out. That rescue is transactional on the surface, but emotionally, it's the moment their fates truly braid. There's a quietly stunning shot after Leela's release where she and Rosa sit on the steps outside the courthouse, smoking in silence. No snipping, no bravado. Just two women who have been chewed up and spat out by different parts of the same machine, staring at the city skyline as if trying to decide whether to burn it or rebuild it. Leela says, almost inaudible, I don't know if I'm one of the good guys anymore. Rosa replies, I don't think there were ever good guys. Just people who haven't run out of justifications yet. It's bleak, but there's a weird kind of freedom in it too, like they've dropped the pretense that anyone here is clean. If this all sounds unrelentingly grim, it's worth pointing out that the show threads in these tiny, humanizing moments that keep it from being a slog. A running gag about Leela's terrible cooking, for instance, culminates in a scene where she tries to make Domenico soup after he's been injured, almost burns the kitchen down, and Rosa ends up laughing so hard she cries. Or the bit where Park, for all her seriousness, completely melts when Rosa's old nanny shows up at the station with a Tupperware of biscotti and insists on feeding that nice detective who keeps my girl alive. Those small, tender absurdities stop the narrative from collapsing under its own darkness. In terms of structure, the last 2 episodes are where the show flexes its ambition. They're not just lead up then big showdown. They run almost in parallel, shifting between different time frames and POVs to slowly reveal how a final, city-shaking event comes together. You see the machinations, Malcolm moving political pieces into place, Valdez trying to cut a side deal, Park scrambling to get a warrant, Leela juggling burner phones like a circus act, Rosa making lists in that hidden closet like she's preparing for apocalypse. The editing is propulsive without being confusing. You always understand enough to feel the tension but not so much that you are ahead of the characters. There is a final gathering, of course. It's a Greyport show, it loves its gatherings. This time, it's a public one, a civic ceremony meant to celebrate a new era for the harbor. Banners, cameras, speeches, the whole city invited. Everything that's been happening in shadows is about to be sealed with a ribbon cutting and some fat contracts. The question hanging over it all is not just who will die here, but whose version of the story will be written into the official record. I'm not going to spell out who pulls which trigger or who steps up to the podium when it matters. That's the last territory I want you to discover in real time. What I will say is that the show resists the easy out. There's no single magical confession that topples every corrupt player. There's no romantic reconciliation that makes all the deaths feel worth it. There is, instead, a messy, bruising climax where personal loyalties and political necessities grind against each other until something cracks. One late-game scene I have to mention, though, is the rooftop confrontation between Rosa and Even. You'll know it when you get there. The wind is howling, the city spread out below like a map of every bad choice they've made. Even has finally pieced together enough of the truth about the Reaper and about his own role in the chain of events leading to Domenico's targeting. Rosa has finally seen, with terrifying clarity, that Even's better world always seemed to involve her family quietly disappearing. They don't scream. That's the killer choice. Their voices stay low, hoarse. Even says, "I loved you because I believed you were trying to be better." Rosa answers, "I loved you because I thought you might let me be worse without leaving." It's brutal, honest, and so deeply sad. He accuses her of choosing violence when she could choose reform. She accuses him of choosing reform as a way to distance himself from the blood he benefits from. There's no winner in that argument, there's just two people finally seeing each other clearly and realizing clarity doesn't equal compatibility. Finhart and Isabella Conti tear that scene up. You see the entire history of their relationship in micro-flinches, the way his hand half reaches for hers and then curls into a fist instead, the way her jaw tightens whenever he says, "we," like it's still a shared future. The decision they come to up there, about whether to stay entangled or cut the rope, is handled with a restraint I really respected. The show doesn't milk a melodramatic breakup or a tearful embrace. It gives them something quieter, more ambiguous, like two people acknowledging that love can exist alongside unforgivable things. As for Leela, I appreciate that the final doesn't reduce her to the survivor's sidekick or the cautionary tale. She makes a choice that's as morally compromised and as gut-driven as anything Rosa does. There's a point where she's given evidence that could burn down both Valdez and the Deverieux political machine in one go, at the cost of definitely sending Even to prison. She hesitates in a way she never has before. She ends up splitting the difference in a way that will infuriate purists and feels, to me, deeply honest to who she is. She cannot bring herself to completely torch the one person who ever loved her without agenda. But she also cannot keep living as a quiet accessory to murder. So she aims her wrecking ball carefully, and lets the chips fall. The show leaves plenty of room to argue whether she did enough. Visually, the last images of the series are haunting. There's no neat montage of everyone moving on to happier lives. The city is left in a state of fragile, partial upheaval. Some bad actors are taken down. Some slither away. Some new faces step into vacuums. The harbor keeps working, the girls keep screaming. Life goes on in Greyport, just with a slightly different balance of who's holding the guns and who's holding the microphones. The very final shot that sticks with me isn't an explosion or a corpse. It's Rosa standing in front of her closet again. The dresses are still there, rows of soft color. The hidden panel is still there too. She opens it, slowly, revealing the black gear inside. The difference this time is in how she looks at it. Earlier in the season, she gazed at the gun like a drowning person spotting air. Now she looks at it like someone eyeing a familiar poison. There's no thrill, no relief, just this tired understanding. She reaches in, not for the gun, but for the ski mask, the relic from her 13-year-old rampage. She holds it, fingers tracing the ragged knit. And then, very deliberately, she tosses it into a small metal bin and lights a match. The mask burns. The gun doesn't move. It's such a brilliant, slippery final beat. She's not renouncing violence, she's renouncing the story other people have told about her violence. She's done being the child monster in a cautionary tale. Whether she's done being a lady, or done shooting, is left more open. When she closes the panel, we see her reflected in the mirror, no pearls, no blood, just a woman with tired eyes and steady hands. Cut to black. Okay, so, stepping back from the minute-to-minute, does all of this actually hang together as a drama? For me, yes, overwhelmingly yes, even when it occasionally wobbles. Let's talk flaws first, because it's more interesting than just gushing. The political legal subplots, as I mentioned, might feel dense for viewers who came in primarily for gunfights and family melodrama. There are stretches in the middle where we spend a lot of time in conference rooms listening to people talk about shipping tariffs. I ate that up because I'm a nerd for systemic stakes, but I can absolutely imagine someone checking their phone during those scenes. There are also a couple of side characters who feel undercooked. A rival young Valdez lieutenant hinted to have a history with Leela never quite gets the development his early scenes promise. A journalist chasing the Reaper story pops in and out, mostly to push plot at convenient times, without getting a real interior life. In a show this focused on its central trio, that's not fatal, but you can feel where another episode or two could have deepened the world's texture. And, yeah, sometimes the dialogue leans a hair too hard into on the nose. Rosa saying, "I am my father's legacy," his dogs and his sins out loud instead of letting us feel that in action was one of those, okay, writers, we get it, moments. But they're rare, and they're balanced by a lot of really sharp, quiet lines that trust the audience to connect dots. On the plus side, the core performances are so strong that they cover a multitude of sins. Isabella Conti gives Rosa a physical vocabulary that evolves over the season. Early on, she's all contained, smooth gestures, elbows close to her body, as if minimizing her footprint. As she reclaims the Reaper, she gets looser but also more grounded, takes up space at tables, leans over maps, stands with her feet planted wider. It's subtle work that sells her internal shift as much as any monologue. Amara Cho, as Leela, is basically a live wire. She has this way of making absolutely stillness feel like the loudest choice in the room. There's a heartbreaking micro-moment in the final where she watches Even on TV delivering a speech, her expression completely blank, and then one tiny muscle under her eye twitches. You feel the entire history of her loyalty and her disappointment in that twitch. It's the kind of acting you can miss if you are half-watching. The show rewards your full attention. Finn Hart gets, I think, the trickiest job. It is difficult to make good man complicit in bad system, compelling instead of just frustrating. He threads that needle by letting Even be both infuriatingly slow to accept reality and genuinely horrified when he does. When he finally screams at Malcolm, "You turned my love into a weapon," it's one of those lines that could have sounded ridiculous in the wrong mouth. Here, it lands, because we've seen every inch of the path that led him there. Direction and cinematography keep things visually interesting throughout. The contrast between the glittering, overlit galas and the damp, shadowy docks never gets old. There's a particularly gorgeous shot toward the end where Rosa is walking down a hallway lined with mirrors at a hotel, and we see multiple versions of her reflected. In one, she looks like the charity princess, in another, the killer, in another, just a scared kid. It's unsubtle, sure, but the execution is so striking I forgave it. The use of music also continues to impress all the way through. Late in the season, Roja's cello motif gets woven into a choral piece sung by a street choir at a memorial, turning her private, haunted theme into a public lament. That's the kind of musical storytelling that makes my critic brain very happy. Sound design in the violence sequences remains grounded. Gunshots are not cool pew-pew, they are conclusive and messy. You hear people scream not just when they're hit but when they're terrified, and it keeps the cost of every action front and center. In terms of themes, the show sticks the landing more often than not. It doesn't offer easy catharsis about cleaning up a dirty city. It doesn't pretend that taking out one or two kingpins will magically fix generations of rot. It sits with the uncomfortable truth that even with some wins, Greyport will still be a place where poor kids get arrested faster than rich liars, where charity galas paper over labor disputes. But it also refuses pure nihilism. The existence of people like Park, the dockworkers who strike despite threats, the kids at Roja's Literacy Foundation who keep showing up to read, those are little embers the show doesn't let the wind completely snuff out. Most intriguingly, it leaves Roja herself in a liminal space. She's not redeemed, exactly. She's not damned beyond all hope, either. She's someone who has done unforgivable things for understandable reasons, in a world that gave her very few alternatives. Whether you walk away rooting for her, fearing her, or a bit of both will probably say more about you than about the script. I love that. I love dramas that turn the mirror around like that. So, would I recommend Done Being a Lady Time to Shoot? Absolutely, with some caveats. If you're into glossy revenge tales where the bad guys are easily hateable, the good guys are pure, and justice is a tight, satisfying bow, this is not that. This is murkier, harsher, and more ambivalent. You will spend a lot of time in rooms where nobody is entirely right, and you'll have to decide who you can stomach watching win a particular move, knowing they'll lose something else later. If, however, you like your crime dramas soaked in moral ambiguity, powered by ferociously good female performances, and willing to interrogate the systems that create their monsters instead of just fetishizing them, this is absolutely worth your time. It's not an easy watch emotionally. You might need to pause sometimes and go hydrate or stare at a wall. But it's rich, it's textured, and it's got that rare combination of pulpy thrills and genuine thoughtfulness. On a purely surface level, it's also just fun to watch a tiny woman in a couture dress dismantle a criminal conspiracy with a handgun and a spreadsheet. The pleasure of competence porn is real, and Roja delivers that in spades, even as the show never lets you forget the toll it takes on her soul. Leela's chaos energy balances that nicely. Park, Domenico, and even our frustrating even round out a world that feels lived in, not just sketched for the plot. For newcomers to this kind of darker, morality-flexible drama, I'd say, go in prepared. Don't expect clear answers about who deserves forgiveness. Be ready for the fact that the most cathartic moments, like when Roja finally stares Malcolm Devereux down across a negotiation table and refuses his last attempt to buy her silence, come laced with sadness and cost. For seasoned fans of revenge sagas and city corruption epics, you'll find familiar beats here, but filtered through a distinctly female gaze that's more interested in what wearing the dress and the gun at the same time does to your spine than in choreographing the biggest explosion. Personally, I came out of it pretty wrecked in the best way. There were choices Roja made that I still can't fully forgive her for. There were moments I wanted to reach through the screen and shake even. There were scenes where Leela's brittle jokes broke my heart. But I'm still thinking about them days later. I still see Greyport's damp streets behind my eyelids sometimes, hear that cello motif when I'm in an echoey parking garage. That's the mark, for me, of a drama that did more than just fill the hours. If you've watched it already, you know exactly which shipyard shot or rooftop argument is carved into your brain. If you haven't, I'm a little jealous you get to experience them fresh. Just, maybe don't watch it as background noise while you answer emails. It deserves your full, uncomfortable attention. That's where I'll leave it for now. If you want me to go even deeper into specific episodes, character choices, or, I don't know, rank the most morally horrifying things Roja does by impact, let me know in the comments. I read more of them than is probably healthy. And if you found this breakdown helpful or you just like hanging out in complicated fictional cities with me, consider subscribing to Jonota News so you don't miss the next deep dive. We've got a lot more stories to pick apart, and if Greyport taught us anything, it's that the interesting stuff is always happening in the shadows just off camera.